Oh, there he is with fish
Okay.
behind him.
I'm
Can
now
I share now?
I'm now recording our Sunday school, so watch your mouth. So watch whatever you say.
I think he's talking to you, Bob.
Well, I'm talking to whoever. So right now we are recording. So this will be put up on Facebook later, so that folks who didn't come to Sunday school can know what we talked about.
Let me try to share now,
Hi,
right?
Joe.
Yeah, you can try share now. Oh, I can sit
Nope.
back and not have to worry about this anymore.
It still says
Cliff,
I
do
can't
you have
share.
a hat on?
Let me see. She's there.
I'm
I don't
here.
see
I
her
just don't know.
I'll try to
There's
kickstart
Okay.
your video from my end.
All right, got it.
There, I see her.
There she is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Joe, I see more of your ceiling than your head.
There you go.
There you go.
There we are.
I tried sharing again. Can't do it.
Huh, hold on. Let me see. Let me see my settings. One person.
Welcome back, Karen. We missed you.
Oh, there we go. Now try it, Carl.
Okay. Okay, I'm sharing, but what am I sharing? My goodness.
The way Zoom is set
There
up
it
now,
is.
Zoom has
Okay.
changed its settings as it's become more popular, because there's a tradition now that some jerks do called Zoom bombing, where they show up in someone else's Zoom and take over it and put horrible things on the screen. So they pretty much set it so when you first connect, everything's locked down, so only the host controls everything.
Can everybody see the parables of Jesus on their screen?
Yep.
I can.
Okay, well, let's proceed. In looking for a topic to pursue for a couple of weeks, parables of Jesus came up, and I thought today we would do part one, and in later weeks we will do a couple more of these. But we're coming into Christmas and New Year's, so I may have something special for those 2 days. So as we zoom, what is a parable?
Story.
A story.
Meaning.
A lesson.
Metaphorical.
How about a short story that teaches a religious or moral lesson? And in the case of Jesus' parables, let's see, there we go. He was quite the master in parables. Anyone familiar with the New Testament is aware that there are many parables that Jesus teaches with, and they are cleverly designed and sometimes have a surprise ending. Well, now it doesn't want to go forward. So let's try this again. There we go. Okay, quite a bit of what he is recorded of his preaching is these parables. And we're familiar with a lot of them. People that have studied the historic Jesus have come up with some conclusions we may or may not agree with, but they have also come up that they think the parables that Jesus taught were truly the words of Jesus. And his parables are short stories, and they do teach a moral or spiritual lesson. And generally, there's some aspect of an unfamiliar concept, such as the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. And he found a way of telling a story about that compared it to something in everyday life that could be understood. When you look at the parables of Jesus, the details are not the thing that you need to hone in on. It's the story. that is important. It's got a central point. It may or may not be a true story, but it is a symbolic story. And 1/3 of the teachings we have from Jesus were parables. And he taught us a lot about the kingdom of God, quite a few about that, and other subjects too. And he wanted us to prompt our thinking and have obedience to God. Now, the 3 synoptic gospels contain the parables. What are the synoptic gospels?
Matthew.
Mark and Luke.
Mark, Matthew, and Luke.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John has no parables.
John wasn't into parables.
Yep.
Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
Luke has the most. They're 24. 18 of them are unique to Luke. The other gospels don't mention them. Matthew had 23, almost as many as Luke, and 11 of them are unique. And Mark had 8, and 2 of them are unique. Unique meaning while the other gospel writers, the other 3, the 3 wrote about the parables, they didn't write the ones that are unique, except in the one that it is in. And each of Jesus's parables teach only 1 or 2 important lessons. It's a mistake to look for a meaning in every sentence. If we get bogged down analyzing the details, we may miss the central point. We want to be able to see the forest, but you can't see the forest for the trees if you get hung up on the details. Question of why did Jesus teach in parables? Well, he was asked about that when the disciples were with him. And he said to them, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside, everything comes in parables, in order that they may look but not perceive, and may listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven."
I don't understand that.
Tito.
What does it mean?
We're going to find out.
Well, let's see what people have said it means, because that was a very harsh explanation.
Well, it didn't get harsh until the end, but it got
Until the end. Well, was he deliberately trying to hide the truth? Were the mysteries of the kingdom to be known only by the disciples?
That wouldn't
The
be like Jesus.
interpretation of this does have experts and lay people puzzled, and many different explanations have been proposed. And I bet Cliff has an explanation. Let's see what is in here. Now, this is a long, drawn out thing, but it says that Jesus, in talking to the people, was talking to many people who were sort of blinded by a lot of things: prejudice, wishful thinking, too lazy to think. And he went back and he quoted Isaiah, where Isaiah in the Old Testament had a similar problem. He said that when he came with God's message to God's people Israel in his day, they were duly understanding that you would have thought that God had shut instead of opening their minds. And Isaiah said, I feel like that today. So when Jesus said this, he did not say it in anger or irritation or bitterness or the word I can't pronounce. He said it with the
Exasperation.
wishful longing of frustrated love, the sorrow of a man who had a tremendous gift to give, and people in many cases were too blind to take. So he was saying it out of frustration. So it is a tone of bitter exasperation, not a tone of regretful love. And Barclay, who commented on this, as many other writers through the years have, said, God save us from hearing his truth like this, but are we closed-minded? Well, let's think about the interpretation of Jesus' parables. A parable invites the reader or listener to supply the interpretation, and some of Jesus's parables have been interpreted in more than one way. And while they can be difficult, the meaning is clear in most cases. Even his enemies probably understood, although they did not accept the lesson. And the interesting thing about Jesus' parables were that in some cases, he supplied the interpretation. In other cases, it's left to us to determine the meaning and the lesson. Today, we're going to look at one that he told and then later he gave the interpretation of. What we know as the interpretation, though, is from historic knowledge and Jesus's other teachings. So when you put it all together, we probably can interpret the ones correctly that he did not interpret for us. So, the kingdom of God is the centerpiece of Jesus' teachings. He had more parables defining the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven than any other subject. About the kingdom of God, and I think even to this day, we sometimes have this issue. The Jews had been expecting the intervention of God to restore the glory of Israel and defeat its enemies. You know, the idea of a Messiah was the idea that he was going to come as a conquering king and bring peace, but also bring the Jews back to power. And when John the Baptist proclaimed that John the Baptist first, and then Jesus proclaimed that the kingdom was at hand, it was certainly understood in terms of the expectation of, wow, here comes our warrior king to take things back. But the kingdom Jesus brought
Talking about parables.
was
Talking about parables. I can see
not the earthly kingdom that was widely inferred from the
have
Old Testament
This
prophecies.
is the camera, the video going, but
I hear some talking. Maybe
Arnett,
I don't.
that was Mary Arnett.
Everybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary
Okay.
Sparks.
So this kingdom that had been talked about in the Old Testament and was promised in the New Testament, and John the Baptist even said, here it is. It's a spiritual kingdom growing in the hearts of men and women. It'll find its fulfillment in the eventual rule of God and the defeat of all evil. Those people who chose to belong to God's kingdom and serve him are those who are destined to inherit this, according to Jesus. So let's look at a parable on the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. And I'm relying heavily on something I picked up on the internet from a pastor, Colin Smith, who has a Chicago church. Okay, we're going to read Matthew 13. Somebody want to read this? Bob?
The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away.
More. And Billy, would you read this?
I can't.
Okay. Who can? Sandy?
So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them."
And Andrick, would you read this?
Let both of them grow together until harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the wheat first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. That's so cool.
Okay. And finally, Pat?
Then he left the crowds and he went into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field."
So at the beginning of this, we said Jesus talked in terms that they would understand. And yet here is this parable about planting seed. And after he told it, the disciples said, "We didn't quite understand that. Would you explain it to us?" So Jesus does explain it. He explains the owner of the field, the enemy that planted the other seed, the seed itself. He explains the field. He takes the question. He explains the growth, and he explains the harvest. We're going to look at each of these things. In his explanation, he says about the owner, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man." The one who sows the good seed owns the field. It's his field. And then we're told that the field is the world. So this sower of good seed is the owner of the whole world. Well, that would be God, right?
Right. If God is God, then God is God.
And God is God. Well, who's the enemy then? When while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. And Jesus said, the enemy is the devil.
Mhm.
So the owner, Christ, God, has an enemy. And you cannot understand the world as it is without taking into account the enemy and his work. This is the long-standing battle between good and evil.
Mhm.
And why does there have to be evil?
We choose evil.
What was that?
We choose evil.
We choose evil. We have these minds that allow us to make choices, right?
Right. Because God didn't make us to be puppets.
Nope, he didn't. Well, let's take a look at the seed. Jesus says the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. Interesting. So the seed's the people
Mm-hmm.
who are growing where they're planted in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two people planting the seeds, and there are two kinds of seeds. Brings it back to us wondering which kind of seed are we, because we are some of these people, right?
I don't think that it's black and white.
You don't think good and evil are?
No, I don't think you're either one or the other.
Oh, you don't think? Okay,
I don't know about
I
that.
think that's a good point. We
Little
have a
column
little
A,
bit of
little
both.
column B.
The question is, are we more one than we are the other? Not are we totally one versus the other? Of course, some of
I've
the people
experienced
watching
the
this may
bad
think
ones.
they're totally one versus the other.
Carl,
I
Amy said
don't
something.
know.
I've experienced the bad ones. And they are bad, bad, bad. And
The
they
bad is there, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the seed. And as we said earlier, the field. Well, the field is the world, Jesus said.
The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof.
Yeah. And sometimes writers will say the field's probably the church.
No.
And but Jesus said the field is the world. This parable is not about the church. It's about the world. And then the question, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Why then does it have weeds? The question put to Jesus.
We still ask that question today.
Yes, we do.
Hmm.
A profound question. Comes up every generation. Where does this evil come from? If God is so good and if Christ is so mighty, then why is there so much evil in the world? This gets pretty deep pretty fast, doesn't it?
Mm.
We're gonna need hip boots for long.
That's probably true. The general answer that a Christian can give to this is that Jesus brought us grace now. Judgment comes later, and what's going to happen between now and then?
That doesn't seem like a very good answer.
Not a very good answer. Do you have a better answer?
Well, I guess you have to go back to the fact that there was evil in the world, and I guess God has never crushed the evil.
Well, I think there's also, I think you also, and this is maybe me getting a little, being married to a therapist here, you have to look at the cycle of violence and trauma and what it does to every following generation and does to those who have been victimized and traumatized. If you pass on good to other people, then those people generally turn out pretty okay, pretty normal. When you pass on trauma and pain to your next generation, they're generally broken more, and they definitely have more they have to sort out to get to a place of normalcy. So what are you going to pass on? Are you going to pass on the love and the grace that you have received in Jesus Christ, making certain that others know that they have that love and grace as well, and in doing so set them free from the bondage of the things of this world? Or are you going to crush them under the values of our world, which says if you don't make a whole bunch of money, drive the best car, get all the toys, you're not worth anything, and then put them on that treadmill and see how they do. And when they fail, tell them they're a failure. And when they don't do like you'd like, you beat them in whatever literal or metaphorical way you want. You're going to get more evil. You're going to get more and more and more brokenness. It's an ongoing cycle. Violence begets more violence.
I think we get to choose which seed we're going to sow, whether we're going to sow the good seed or the bad seed.
Mm-hmm.
If y'all pardon me going back to Genesis again, Adam and Eve was put in the garden and told to dress, till, and keep it. And they're in this parable, we're the servants, we're the sowers, and we choose what we're going to sow.
If I may say, I have worked in environments with many people and different stations within that system, let's say. And I have seen how a person told me to my faith, if you join us, you can also get a husband. And she gave herself as an example that she has a husband who makes it possible that she can play golf on the weekend. This is real, out there, that evil by itself, not you being involved as a parent, aunt, and uncle, itself finds ways to control, to gain money, to gain power by playing into the weaknesses of various people who do not think past their immediate wants, needs, or wishes. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've heard it.
Well, this may not be a good decision, but so what did Jesus say we should do about this? And Jesus, in explaining it, said, we're going to let the weeds and the wheat grow together until harvest.
Right.
Which is something I struggle with, because if the weed is choking out a plant somewhere, I want to get the weed off the plant.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and I've said this before, and I say again, there is no such thing as a perfect parable. You got to have wiggle room in all of them. They're teaching a lesson, but they don't teach everything within that lesson. It is meant to be an abstract lesson, but it is not the be all end all of Jesus telling you how to live your life. You want that, look more to the Sermon on the Mount where he gets into specifics. But yeah, no parable is perfect. No metaphor is perfect. I mean, Carl, we've had this where you come to me after a service and said, that metaphor didn't work for me. And I'm like, yep, it happens. Sometimes I will miss the mark with somebody in my analogy. And that's because I'm imperfect too. And
one of the things I see in this, though, is that we can be good among the bad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
That's one way to look at it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think the other side of this is interesting to me. I think some weeds think they're seeds.
Oh, yeah.
Then we get
conversely, some seeds think they're weeds. There's a lot of people who don't realize their value and don't realize they're loved. And people tell them that they're weeds when they are not.
Right.
So yeah, it goes both ways. But yeah, Bob, you raise a good point.
I agree. It goes both ways.
Well, now that we've talked a little bit about this, so is this world getting better or is it getting worse?
Bad year to ask that question.
What was that?
I say it's a bad year to ask that question.
A bad year to ask that question.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I'll hold my answer to the end.
Yes and no, I heard.
I'll hold my answer to the end.
Well,
I think the answer is both. I think that's good. I mean, that's accurate. The answer is both. It is getting better and it is getting worse. There's no doubt.
getting better and it's getting worse at the same time.
These were the best of times. These were the worst of times.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many times has that been said?
Yeah.
The good seed is growing and producing an abundant harvest, but the weeds are growing too. Okay, let's talk about the seventh point that Jesus was questioned about and his answer. He says, at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. This is pretty harsh. This is not necessarily what is emphasized in our Presbyterian church all the time, right? But it's something off the lips of Jesus.
Why do you say it's harsh? It's reassuring. When the
It's
bad
reassuring.
are going to get theirs. Period.
They're going to get
You don't plant corn and get beans.
So we're living, and the reassuring part is we're living in God's grace. And God's grace will take us through this. The day of judgment has not yet come. And until that day, the kingdom will look like good wheat in a field laced with weeds. Well, as you take a big look, 2 steps back at what we may have learned in the parable of the weeds, I call them takeaways. And the first one is to stay engaged, because we all grow together, weeds and wheat together. And the question is, where has God rooted us? Where have we been sowing? Are we engaged? For heaven's sakes, don't withdraw from the world. There aren't any spots to withdraw to. The seed is sown everywhere, so you bloom where you're planted. And the hope that Augustine said, those who are weeds today may be wheat tomorrow.
He's a very big optimist.
That's an optimist, but if we are wheat and we are engaged, some weeds might become wheat.
That's called salvation.
For more on this, see Paul.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good, Cliff.
Yes, that was good. Okay, second takeaway, we got to practice tolerance. We're growing together, and tolerance is a Christian virtue. And we are always going to encounter people that we disagree with. And we may be right and we may be wrong, but we had better be patient. And we may discover something if we are tolerant. And how controversial is this next statement that is underlined? The mission of the church is sowing seeds, not pulling weeds.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Well,
controversial?
I think it depends on which church you ask.
And I also think that the tolerance one is controversial because, how much do you tolerate when, where?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to turn the other cheek sometime, but we're to turn the other cheek.
Yeah, this cheek turning exercise can be difficult, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But this is where pastors' words come to be. I think we have a big enough challenge on our hands trying to deal with sin in our own hearts and our own families. And we have the power to change that where we can change it.
We make the choice.
The passion of pulling out weeds, unfortunately, speaks to some of the ugliest of our human tendency. And there's a lot of money to be made on pointing out the weeds and having them pulled out of our lives. And there's lots of people who are willing to be part of that process. And there's lots of people who are willing to pack their pews by basing their belief on we got to be about getting rid of the weeds, or their movements or their whatever. Getting rid of blank calls people to action, unfortunately. And we have to be the ones to say that's not what we're about. That's not that we're working on us. When the day comes that I get all of my messes in order to the point that I can go mess with somebody else's, I'll be in a pretty good place. But I'm a mess, so I know I got my own stuff to work on for now.
No, you're not.
Oh, yes, I am. We all are. We're all a beautiful, wonderful mosaic of broken pieces, and we're all working on it all the time.
What I find fascinating about all this is it is a parable of Jesus, and it is using his words of explanation to the disciples that we're going to grow together. And the question is, are we going to grow as wheat, or are we going to grow as weeds? And
the other thing
that is our choice.
As we're talking about parable and meaning, keep in mind, there's another parable just like this, and all the parts in it play a different role than they do here.
That's right.
In the other parable, we're the earth, and the question is, how well do we receive the seed? So, I mean, there's times that you can even have a parable that walks hand in hand with the one you're reading, and all the meaning has changed. And same thing goes with Bible stories themselves. And I try to remind us that that sometimes we are the villain in the story, as much as we don't want to be that part, as much as we always want to be the hero of the story. Sometimes we got to ask, when are we the villain, and when are we the bad role, and what can we do to change that? Because if we just show up every Sunday and just leave feeling warm and fuzzy and wow, glad I'm one of the good guys, then what more is there to work on? But there's always something to work on.
Always something to do. And that's why I find the parables to be so interesting. As you said, the role of the example in the parable does shift depending upon the parable. And I thought in subsequent weeks we could have additional examinations of parables. But I wanted to start with this one because it contains an explanation. Some of them don't contain the explanation by Jesus. And he also talks about the harvest. And the righteous shall shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father, when you anticipate a harvest. And God's going to harvest the wheat. And he'll bring his people home, and the righteous will shine like the sun. And the question is, which bundle are we going to be in that day? Right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
by the way,
the other
yes?
thing, the seed matures. The plant matures, and I've seen people, or I know people, or I knew people that were ready for harvest, and I've known people that sort of stayed. They're like the seed in the desert that doesn't bloom but every 7 years. They're sort of standing by waiting for something to happen for them to blossom. But they're good seed. They're not weeds, but they're just not there yet. Does that make any sense?
Well, you could also, if you want to go down the analogy path, look at areas where you have to have a forest fire to bring new bloom.
Right. Yeah.
You got to have a burn off of old wood and overgrowth and covering for some of the plants that have sat waiting for their chance to grow to be exposed. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways you can take this analogy, some of which people were very uncomfortable with. But yeah, there's different things that bring seed to life than just really good sunshine and really good rain.
When I was a kid and going to youth fellowship, we got into the discussion several times about this life that we were not living, the sinful life. Mm-hmm. What about if you lived a sinful life for a while and then decided you were going to switch over to the good life? Is that something you could end up doing? And of course, the good life is the place to stay, but us kids used to kick that one around. I don't know whether anybody else ever did.
I think we've all experimented a little bit.
All experimented a little bit. And there's something that I remember as a kid, the dying, the deathbed conversion. Mm-hmm. The person that had the bad life their whole time, but just before they die, they accept Jesus and the once saved, always saved concept. But anyhow, it leads to interesting discussions. But the idea that there are two kinds of seed and we're living in that is our challenge. That brings us to the end of today's Sunday school lesson. as I go off in the corner thinking about what I'm going to be teaching from, I've already told you I want to do some more of the parables, but I would be interested in researching any subjects you all might like to pursue, because if we can pursue them and have a discussion about them, it might be worthwhile. So let me know if there's a subject that you would like. Meanwhile, tune in next Sunday at 11, and we will have another Sunday school class.
One more thing, Carl, on that deathbed thing.
Yes.
We want to try to judge, and it's not us, that we don't have to judge, and we're not to judge, and it's God's business on all that kind of thing.
But we love to judge.
We're very good at it.
We're very good at it. I had a cartoon I was going to show. I'll show it next week. It's pretty cute about that.
I like it. I like the topics.
Yeah.
You make me aware of many things. So thank you very much.
Now, the 2 Sundays after Christmas are going to be pre-recorded, set up ahead of time so that myself, Leslie, and everybody else can kind of have a couple weeks off. I will not be turning on the Zoom the week after Christmas. The second week we can, but the week after Christmas we will not have Sunday school. Okay?
We will forgive you.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll skip New Year's.
Yes.
Okay. And hope for a good one.
Yes.
Hey, Cliff,
Yeah.
go lay down. It was a good save today.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Oh.
going to
It's
be.
very good.
That was amazing.
That's one of your best sermons.
Well, like I said, I probably will leave it as it is, in the main broadcast, but I may put up the thing, because in the one I made, it showed examples from Muppet Christmas Carol. It showed those pictures I was showing a lot more clearly. But I was, my mom just texted me, because moms are moms, to say, good recovery, way to go, that was great. And I just texted back and I said, realize looking back, I had asked her for those pictures after I'd recorded the sermon. I was like, hey, I do this part where I talk about Christmas past. Will you send me some pictures? And I had this real emotional moment with them after she sent them, but I'd already recorded the sermon. But this morning, there I am talking about those pictures while I'm showing them to you, and could kind of feel like it was a lot more real to me, to say those things and do those things. So in some ways, yeah, it was good. I wish the service wasn't out of order the way it is, but I probably am just going to leave it.
Nothing is perfect,
Nothing
Cliff.
is perfect.
Cliff,
And you did a wonderful job this morning.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
You did.
I do want to, before the year is over, go back and collect all the outtakes that you all haven't seen of where things have gone wrong behind the scenes and put them together for a fun Sunday someday. But
You could
That-
include an outtake from today.
well, I mean, yeah, I can just show today, but I mean, I have plenty of times that I'm by myself in the sanctuary and I've screwed up, the Bible reading for the 10th time, and I'm just losing it. So
A lesser man would have just unplugged.
well, I didn't want to do that. No, we don't unplug. We continue on. We continue on. That I joked about, hey, I've had these times in radio where everything was falling apart. Like we had the computer that played all the music and all the commercials go down, and I had to go and try to get it logged back on while a guy on the air stalled, and I got it back up. I got it back alive. I was transferring stuff around and doing all this crazy stuff. I'm like, it's got to go on. It's got to go on. You don't just say, to heck with this, we aren't doing it. You do something. Same way for that first week. I just showed up with the camera, turned it on, and said, well, this is going to be worship today. We'll deal with it. But yeah, I can't just not do worship. So, but my voice is exhausted. I am going to go lay down, and I am going to find a beverage of some type of concoction before the day is over. I'll say, see y'all.
Good to see you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Have a safe
Bye.
week.
Thank you, Carl.
You betcha.
Yes, thank you, Carl.
See y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.